Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Goldmaking, presented by darkshorecapital. Today is February 25th in the year 2019. Market update for the week. We've got a couple interesting things to talk about. Number one, we're going to start from the bottom because that's what we're going to do. ATVI continues to fall in price over time, down to $41. As you can see, the trend from the start of the year and the start of the expansion has just been downhill. There's been plenty of that been talked about recently, so we're going to leave that at that. Just don't want to forget about it. The other thing you might have noticed at this point is the very large percentages on the Primal Fire line for the European region. Currently, the median price is 3,875 gold versus the 623 gold on the United States side of the pond. It's around a 400 or 500% increase depending on which time frame you're looking at. That's not a typo. That is the value. And we are going to take a little bit of a closer look at this because I think it's actually a very interesting opportunity to see a reason why this market update can be useful. Because this data is legitimate, and we're going to figure out why. So first things first, the image on the left is just a selection from, I think, actually the lowest price that I could find on a server for Primal Fire. As you can see, current price 9 gold. So on this particular server, it's obviously not the region price of 3,874. And in fact, none of the servers you can see listed here actually have anywhere close to that number, which is interesting. The blue line is the price. The orange line is each represents one server, and it represents the quantity of Primal Fires available on that server or cluster of servers. So as you can see, some of the spikes go up to 160, and those actually probably go beyond. Others are very, very low. And you'll notice the blue line sort of goes beyond the 2,000 gold limit there before it reaches the last few servers. And in fact, if we were to bring up the actual Undermine Journal page for this and take a look, we would see that the highest prices are somewhere in the hundreds of thousands, which is a bit ridiculous. In fact, I do want to actually bring this up so we can take a bit closer look and see. So the prices are increasing from around, these are sort of the reasonable prices, anywhere from 300 gold up to, around 700, 800 range. I'd say those are fairly reasonable. Then you get into what I assume are extremely low population servers where individuals or groups of individuals can be controlling the markets for these. And then past this 2,000 gold mark, we have a 2,700 gold mark, 3,500 gold mark, and then this one on Malorn and Ysera, where somebody has one Primal Fire listed for just under 400,000 gold. Now that's obviously the fluke that's really skewing these numbers, because that's just such an absurd price. And it just so happens that when the Undermine Journal did the data collection for Primal Fires, that there was just one up there for this absurd price, and that's what wound up skewing the overall region price. Okay, so obviously that's a little bit unrealistic, and on pretty much every other server you're going to see something a bit more reasonable. But, what did this do? This got us to take a look at this item in a little bit more depth, right? So if you are on some of these servers with lower quantity, I would venture a guess that you could sell Primal Fires for over 1,000 gold on some of these European servers. That's like a fairly legitimate way to make gold, because I know there's at least one decent farm for Primal Fire at the Throne of Kil'jaeden in Old Hellfire Peninsula. I'm sure there's some others. If you're ever doing Burning Crusade stuff, for example, Burning Crusade Time Walking is just ending this week, so obviously that's a bit late for that as a tip here, but anytime that comes around, more moats show up. Although, thinking back on, I did actually quite a few of these this week, and I don't think there were any time walking dungeons that dropped Primal Fire, which actually might be another explanation for the generally higher price of Primal Fire versus the other primals from that expansion. Anyway, as you can see, we could go on and talk about this forever, and we're going to cut it off at some point. So I will leave a link to this item in the description if you'd like to go investigate this further and see for yourself. By then, I would imagine that the mean price has dropped from the absurd almost 4K. Let's move on to the news for the week. So, a few interesting things, mostly regarding the future of the game. Number one, a little bit more information has come out about the next raid. It is going to be a 2-boss raid, which is one of the shortest raids you can have. And wow, there are a few 1-boss raids, and I'm struggling to remember off the top of my head if there are any 2-boss raids. But, so it's not a huge amount of content is the point there, but there are some interesting things. For example, the items that drop from the bosses in this raid all have, I think it's literally all of them, have some sort of a unique ability, similar to how Legion Legendaries had unique abilities in place of, a normal secondary stat budget. So the implications for this regarding gold making are a bit tenuous and tangential and kind of dependent on how this all turns out. But as with any raid, you can expect to see some increased interest in raiding, which of course means increased demand for raiding consumables. So definitely want to be ready for that if that's something you're positioned to do. I wouldn't expect it to be all-out craziness since it is just a 2-boss raid. And personally, I'm sort of interested to see how the world-first raiding guilds handle this raid, because it's turned into quite a bit of a big production, especially for Method, who's going all out with the flying players out to London and everything. I don't know if they're going to do that for something that's only 2 bosses. I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see, both from a gold making perspective and just as a player of the game. Next thing, also regarding PTR, there are some new quests for various professions. Interesting note, only for non-gathering professions. So if you have a dual gatherer druid, sucks to be you, I guess. I don't feel that bad though, because you have quite a big advantage with the travel form nonsense that you can do in herbs. So I'm going to defer to Ryan on this one. He made a great video kind of detailing the overview of what to expect currently on the PTR, and he has a nice, passionate, opinionated section in there, which is always good for some good entertainment. So give that a watch. There'll be a link down below or in the slides or wherever you feel would like to consume that, or you can always just go find them on YouTube as well. And then lastly, allied races. I do have to mention it because with the amount of promotional material Blizzard is putting out, it's bound to be soon that they're going to finally release the Zandalari Trolls and the Kultirian Humans. There's been a bit of back and forth discussion I've had in a few different places regarding allied races and the opportunities in gold making. My personal sort of hot take on the whole situation is you should purchase bags once the allied races have been released, assuming that my hypothesis here is correct, that everyone and their mother is going to be making bags in preparation for this release, and then once it hits, they're all going to be like, yeah, throw them all up in the auction house, make tons of gold. But that's just going to drive the price down, because that's how supply and demand works. So keep an eye out for bag prices on the days that the allied races get released, and maybe pick up some cheap ones because people just don't pay attention to market values. We'll see. There are other things to consider as well. Various items used for leveling, gun shoes, goblin gliders, cheap potions, etc., things to just speed things up. Plenty of opportunity, I'm sure, there, but I will not be going into that in detail on the podcast. Let's move on to some Q&A. First question. Actually, quick shout out to Emery on Twitter for always posting fantastic questions every Monday. This one goes out to you, my friend. What do you think is the healthiest approach to dealing with highs and lows in your motivation to go out and make gold? Again, fantastic question. This is a bit more of a kind of meta goblin psychology, if you will, question. So the short answer to this question is stay focused on your long-term goals and detach from your emotions. And this is really sort of just good advice in general about dealing with highs and lows with anything. And because that's really what this is about. Like, this is not advice that's specific to gold making, right? This is just good goal advice in general. As with anything, I don't think there's any human in the world that doesn't experience highs and lows, even with things that they absolutely love doing. You know, all you have to do is look at people who stream for a living, right? Like, and study them at all at any length and realize, like, yeah, sometimes they have rough days, even though they are literally playing video games for a living. It seems like to us outsiders that there's no way that could possibly ever be a bad thing, but it is, and it definitely happens. So some advice I have for that and dealing with that is just, A, of all, understanding that it happens. You have highs and lows. And B, of all, have strong goals in mind and keep those at the forefront of your mind. Remind yourself of those every day. If you have to put sticky notes on your monitor to remind you of what you're working towards, or, you know, get a whiteboard in your bedroom and write them on there. Whatever it is you have to do, you can think of all kinds of different reasons or ways to do this. Remind yourself. That will help you stay focused, because when you get into those lows, you look at that and be like, all right, yeah, this is what I'm working for. I'm just going to do what I need to do today and move on to the next thing. And eventually it'll come around. Everything comes in cycles. So that's my advice on that. Next question. Buying Reigns of Poseidon in hopes of Najatar. Interesting question. So there's going to be a content update to Battle for Azeroth coming in the near future, which is going to be focused around Nazjatar, which is, I'm assuming, based on this question and the fact that it's all the promotional stuff, it's going to be underwater. So there's a good chance that having swimming mounts could potentially give you some profit, because everyone's going to want one if they don't have one already. Now, Reigns of Poseidon are sort of ridiculously underpriced at the moment, at least relative to what they used to be, which is of course a symptom of the Cataclysm sort of world boss rare spawn rate change that happened a while back. Became much easier to farm things like Reigns of Poseidon and some other Cataclysm items. So it's hard to really imagine losing out too much on purchasing Reigns of Poseidon, somewhere in the 5 to 10k range, which is, I believe, what they're at right now. I say go for it. I mean, what do you have to lose? Potentially could see some pretty decent profits there. I wouldn't get your hopes up too high, but I do really like where the person who asked this's head is at, because it's good. It's thinking about future content, thinking about what people want. And I certainly encourage all gold makers to do the same and sort of think ahead a bit, because it helps out a lot. Next question. What little oddity about your server/region economy bakes your noodle? I put this question in pretty much solely because of that last little part. I've never heard the term bakes your noodle before. And I've actually provided a link to the Reddit thread. It's pretty good, actually, a good read through if y'all would like or did not see it yourselves. I'd highly recommend doing it. Some interesting stuff. As for my actual answer to this question, really nothing comes to mind. I get frustrated when Ghost Iron ore prices get too high, but that's not really that interesting or funny. I will defer to the thread for some more interesting answers on that one. Do you ever avoid buying your competitors' auctions? No, just don't really pay attention to it. Even if I did or was more cognizant of my competitors, no. As a goblin, like, I'm gonna buy what's cheapest. I'm not gonna. I don't have some personal vendetta against other people, right? We're all in this together. May the best goblin win. Lastly, what to do with old world mats from alt leveling? Interesting question. Sort of a multi-part answer. And it really all revolves around what you want to do with your gold making and how much you value your time. Because in a lot of ways, old world materials and things you get from leveling are going to be very slow to sell because it's from previous expansions. That's just how it works. So the amount of time you're going to have to invest to just sell things raw is going to be fairly significant. You're going to have to set up TSM operations. You're going to have to figure out a good strategy for selling. And you're going to have to post those auctions every day. And with the current way materials work, you do have to be cognizant about your stack sizes and potentially, taking huge hits from auction house cuts and deposits. So that's all stuff you have to think about. And already we've, spent a lot of time thinking about these raw materials and kind of have to ask yourself, is it worth it? A lot of these items do not sell for very much gold. And in most cases, you're probably just better off vendoring them. I'm not going to lie. just realistically, like it's better just have some gold and go do more efficient things. Now, if you are interested in doing any old world transmog crafting, it gets a little bit different, a little more interesting, because you can, use these items for your actual crafting, and it's not going to really save you that much money, but it's nice to just have the stock available. So the best way I found to do this is to utilize a guild bank and open up a few tabs, getting a little bit of an organizational plan going, and pretty much just shoving all of your old world materials in the guild bank. Then having all of your characters who craft old world transmog in that guild, with, of course, access to the guild bank. Then when you do your TSM restock on your old world crafting operations, you can just go to the guild bank, hit the move button, everything moves into your inventory, you're crafting, things are great. Anything that you didn't use just goes back in, and if it's needed on another character, it's there, it's available. It's great. So this is a great solution if you're interested in doing old world crafting. And it's not too difficult to set up a guild. You just have to go to a major city, go to the guild person, ask a guard, and get a guild charter, then pay 5 people to sign your charter. Just get 5 people to sign your charter. Paying usually helps because it provides a bit of a motivation. And then, yeah, you're just good to go. You have a guild bank just to store all your old materials. Again, that's really only worth it if you're planning at any point to do any crafting, and you actually have a significant amount of materials that are worth storing. So those are my answers. In general, unless you're doing old world crafting, just vendor anything that's not that valuable. It's probably just not worth your time. And on that note, it's time to end for this episode. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. I do want to say a couple things just about the podcast show / video, whatever you want to call it. If any of you are not aware, this product is distributed both on YouTube as well as various podcasting platforms. You can find Darkshore Capital on Spotify, on iTunes, on Google Play, and a bunch of various other third-party podcast providers. It gets picked up on there as well. So just give it a search on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is, and you can listen to my voice while you commute or mow the lawn or whatever it is you're doing. Perhaps maybe some gold making, since this is a gold making show. That said, if you do have any questions, comments, or would like to discuss gold making at length, feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube video, reach out to me on Twitter, or you can send me an email, darkshorecapital@gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you next time.